Let's begin. You have recorded your interview and you have opened up and named your project file. So here we are, Tim's Intro to Filmmaking demo with today's date, September 21, 2020. When you double click on it, it will open up Premiere Pro, and this is the blank template file. And you'll notice that we have here the project window, and the project window shows us what assets are in our project. And assets are things like video files, audio files, still images, graphical elements, that kind of material that Premiere Pro allows you to edit with, okay? So let me just give you a quick brief tour of what is in this project file. And one of the things that's a shortcut, by the way, shortcuts, you need to learn them. So I'm going to be speaking with shortcuts, and hopefully these are some of the ones that I use the most. They'll also be helpful to you. So anytime you click on an area, a window in Premiere Pro, you'll see this blue box that surrounds it. And it basically means that that's the active area of your screen, so that if you click a shortcut key, it's going to do different things when different windows are targeted. So one of the shortcuts that's really helpful is basically a fill to screen shortcut. In any area of the screen that is blue, I can make that full screen by clicking the tilde key. The tilde key is that little squiggly horizontal line that's below the escape key at the top left of your keyboard. So I'm going to select the project window and hit the tilde key, and you'll see that it fills my screen to show me just that window. But I can hit the tilde key again, and it takes me right back to my previous state. So really helpful to kind of back and forth if you're trying to see, like, maybe you've expanded too many like folders and you have to scroll up and down a long ways, and you're like, you know what, or like this, right? I have to scroll left and right to see all these things. If I just hit the tilde key, I can see a lot more information here than I could before. You can do the same thing though with playback. So maybe you're playing back your video and you want your video to be full screen. Select that window, hit the tilde key, and you can toggle that back and forth. Same thing with your timeline. Maybe your timeline view, you have a lot of tracks and you want to see everything real fast. It's just a really cool little shortcut, all right? So let's hit the tilde key. Let's go ahead and maximize this view here, and let's just go through these different bins that are given to you here. So by the way, in Premiere Pro, these aren't called folders, they're called bins, but they're the same thing. They have the same structure. So I've provided a bunch of template bins for you here that are hopefully just going to help you, and if you don't need them, you can delete them, right? They're just a template. Can easily be removed. The first one is your edits. Actually, let's come back to the edits first. Let's go to Source. And basically, raw is going to be where you put your raw files, and sync to dailies is going to have a timeline in it that you can basically sync everything from scene 1 or scene 2. And so basically, you would have a different bin for every scene that you're working with, and inside that bin would be a timeline that actually has the synced footage. And by synced, what I mean is that the sound is synchronized with the video, right? This is why we use a slate or we clap at the beginning when we're recording with separate sound and separate video. It's so that it makes it easier to sync it up in post. I don't think we're going to need to do that in this class, so I'm not going to talk about that any further. So synced dailies, we can just delete that folder. We're not going to need it for today. Raw footage, this is going to be where you have your video camera footage, your B-roll. If you're shooting any sort of A-roll where you are shooting somebody that's talking. While I talked about not having that be, we don't want you to do sit-down interviews for this first project. You can do something where you have somebody talking to the camera live while they're doing something, and perhaps that's part of your film. I'm okay with that. That would be A-roll. You can organize this however you want. You can have it shot by day or by type of shot it is. I don't think it makes sense to get too carried away here, because really it's just supposed to be a bin that holds all of your files for your video in some sort of logical organization that makes sense. But for today's, what we're going to be working with is sound, and we have the ADR in the VO folder. So let's go ahead and grab our sound file and put it in there, because this is what you're going to be doing this week, right? You're going to record your interviews, and you're going to then put that in there. So let's go ahead and navigate to the folder, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways of adding these assets to your file. So the first one is just to click and drag. So I'm going to click and drag. I don't think I did it right. Let's try again. Click and drag. There we go. I'm going to hold it over here, and I'm just going to drag it into the ADR folder. And boom, it imports it in there, and there it is. There's my sound file. This is an hour and 20-minute interview that I did for a doc project I worked on a number of years ago. So there's the file. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete to remove it and show you another way to add files, okay? So the other way is if you double click anywhere in this big gray space, it'll pop up this window. Oh, I did it too many times. It pops up this window that basically says like, hey, take me to where you want to import something, and click the import button. So I'm just going to go back here to week 2, and I know it's under Rob's interview, and there's the audio file. So I'm going to hit the import button, and there it is. It's added this audio file here. I'm going to drag and drop it up here under the ADR VO folder, because that's where it should go. And, you know, maybe to be on the safe side, I'm just going to hit the return key on my keyboard. That's the shortcut to rename something. Or you can just click on it and then click on it again after about a second, and you can rename it. I'll call this Rob's interview. All right. The third way, there's a couple other ways. You could right click and you could go import, and it's going to pull up the same window. Or you can go up here, file, and import, and it's going to pull up the window. Or there's a shortcut, Command I, pulls up the window too. So there's like 5 different ways. There are actually more ways to import files into Premiere Pro. So there's a couple ways for you to know about. All right. So this is actually the only asset we're really working with, but later on we're going to want to add music and into this folder here if we're working with music. Keep in mind, right, anything you do in here, it's not really moving any of the files on your hard drive. It's actually just creating shortcuts to them and referencing them. So all the editing program is doing is leaving all your files where you put them, but it's just letting you like rearrange them on this imaginary timeline where it plays them back as if they're one film. Okay, I'm going to minimize this. Graphics. This is where you can put things like graphical assets that you might have. Letterbox mats, nests. Nests we'll talk about in editing class. I don't think you're going to need that in this class. Maybe. We'll see. If you do, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Still images, titles, VFX work, right? All of that can go in there. And then finishing, color and sound. If there's any sort of like special timeline or special files that need to be put there, you can put them there. So most likely we're not going to be doing much with these folders right now, at least. Source you might be working with if you shot footage this weekend or in the next week or two. Most likely you're not going to need to be putting stuff in there until you're working on actually adding visuals to your films, which is after the first draft is due. All right. Let's go to edits. This is the main page where you're going to be working. Once you have put your material in here, you don't generally need to go hunting for it as much in there. Although you could. There's definitely different ways of organizing and different schools of thought. The way I'm going to show you today, you'll be working primarily with sequences. So here we go. We're going to open up edits. And you've got 3 different bins that show up. Z old, right? Obviously, this is just where you put old stuff that you're not currently working with. The current folder, hey, guess what that is? That's going to be your current edit. So at first, you might just be looking through footage, and you don't need a timeline for that. That's an editing timeline. You maybe need like an organization or a string out timeline. We'll talk about that in a second. But once you start editing your film and you're like, okay, I'm actually ready to start putting pieces together, you're going to want to give that a name. And you can use day, month, year, or you can use sequential numbering, kind of however you want to do it. But I do recommend that you create a lot of timelines and work on them often. So for example, let's say that this was called Tim's Demo, and what is it, the 20th? I can't remember. 21st. Tim's Demos, go back over here. 21/09/20, right? And it's getting late, I don't do a whole lot of work on it, and so tomorrow I come back and I open up my project file and I see that the current file is named this, but now it's actually the 22nd. What do? Well, you right-click on the sequence, you hit duplicate, and you copy this old one here into your zold folder. And this new one, you're going to rename 220920. Delete that end. Oops, I left a little bracket there. Right, and now this is your new sequence. And what we did is we duplicated the old one. So this has the same information, the same stuff is in here, but now when we move forward today, we're working with a new timeline. What's really cool about this method is if you ever need to go back to something that happened yesterday because today you decided, I don't need this shot, and you deleted it from your timeline, oh, guess what? Maybe later you decide you want it back. You can just go to yesterday's zold file. Sorry, I double-clicked. And there it is. You can access it from there. So this is the advantage to working digitally is, you know, my wife's a fine artist. She works with clay a lot. You kind of come to this point of no return where with clay you have to make a decision, am I going this way or this way? And you live with the consequences. But in film, there's always Command-Z, which is edit, undo, right? You can always sort of undo something, or the more, I think, time-efficient way to do it is to duplicate your projects whenever you're at a point in life where you need to decide, am I going to go left or right here? Am I going to make this decision or this decision? I'm not sure. Well, that's a really good time to duplicate your project. That way, if you ever decide that you want to go back the way you had it before, you can really quickly, all right? Okay, so we're actually not going to be working on this right away, though. This is when we're actually ready to edit. Let's start with string outs. String outs are basically where we put all the files. So, for example, let's say we shot a bunch of clips on day 1. We would just make a string out called day 1, and that would be where we just dump all of our files in. Or if we were working on like a narrative scripted film, maybe we have things organized by scene. Hopefully we have things organized by scene. We're going to just put them, create different scenes, different sequences for different scenes, and you can drop the clips on those sequences as you get this footage. So let's go ahead and just call this one, since we're not going to be using scenes and we're not really using days, I'm just going to call this Rob's full interview, right? And I'm going to hit the tilde key again to go back to our older view. I'm going to double click on Rob's full interview, and it loads it up here. I'm going to close my demo, which was my current edit. We're not using that. And so we've got Rob's full interview over here. And now let's go to our sound file, and here's what we want to do. We want to get this sound file in this sequence. There's a number of ways of doing it. Probably the easiest when you're first starting is just to click and drag and drop. And you'll notice that it's green and it's put it on the lower part of the sequence. The upper part is reserved for videos, and you can see V1, V2, V3, these are video tracks. The bottom part is audio tracks, and this is only audio. I did an audio-only interview. All right, and if we hit play, let's see if we can get some sound to come out here.
Wait, what brought you here? This smell, like, because you're...
Needed it, I can remember, because they hadn't been done in a while. And bale mill, they really use the millstones to grind grain. It's some.
Okay, so obviously this is a long interview, and this is the whole thing here. And really, this is what I always want to leave it like. Now, I don't necessarily mean that you can't create edit points here. We're going to cut it up, but I don't want to actually make. Well, I don't want to remove anything from it. I always want to be able to have a sequence I can go back to where I just have the full clip. All right. So here's how I would approach. I think all of you should do it this way. There's many ways to edit, but I think for this project with you all sort of at different levels, I'm going to show you what I think is a great way to edit that will save you a lot of time. Hopefully you don't have an hour and 20-minute long interview like I do. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play a little bit here and show you how I would approach it. So one of the things that you're going to notice here is I'm going to just move my mouse around and I'm going to make these tracks taller so that I can see the waveform, because the waveform actually kind of tells me the taller these lines are, the louder the sound is. And so the waveform is going to help me figure out where people are talking. And so I can actually just trim away stuff that's not important. So for example, if I move my mouse over here, it changes shape to this little red arrow pointing to the right. If I click and drag, it's basically going to allow me to remove that front section of the clip. And so I don't need to listen to all that silence. There's nothing going on there. I want to hear what happens when he starts talking. So here we go.
Okay. To answer your question, I have always been interested in Mills.
Okay, cool. So I guess I'm trying to think about maybe what I would want to do before, because I actually am going to start doing some edits. And I'm going to change my mind here. When I told you that we're not going to be deleting stuff, honestly, if you ever wanted the original interview, you just double click on this and it pulls it up here in the source view, and you can kind of scrub in your timeline. Scrubbing is when you click and drag. You can scrub to anywhere in your timeline. Also, you might notice that for some reason during the interview, I was recording it in stereo and I switched it to mono, and we only have one track. So one of the things that I probably would want to do here is make this mono as soon as I can. And let me show you how I would do that. I would do it by, let's do it to the original clip itself. I'm going to right click on the clip. I'm going to go to modify, audio channels. And there's a left channel and there's a right channel. And this horizontal section here stands for clip 1. So this actually stands for the clips, like left channel and right channel right here. And up here, media source channel, this is basically, another way of thinking about this is the output channel. Where's the sound going to go? So up here, these are my speakers, my left speaker and my right speaker. So if you look at the clip here, you'll notice that it's actually the left channel. You can see the L up here. The top channel is the left channel. It's the top channel that actually has all the material I want, not the right channel. So I don't really want the right channel. So I'm going to just click here on the right channel and remove it. And so, well, there's two ways of doing this, I suppose. We could keep it as stereo, and we could tell it that we want the left channel to be duplicated on both the left and the right output speakers. But instead, I'm pretty sure, let me just click here, it's been a little bit since I've done this. Yeah, it goes like this actually. It's the other direction for some reason. I don't know why I was confused there. If you click the left tracks here, you can see that I got the left. If you go down, basically, I think I actually had it backwards. The media source channel is the clip, is the source file, and the output is clip 1 here. So the way it's showing it to me is a little confusing, but basically when I do this, if you look at the clip, it's going to update, and basically it duplicated the top left channel onto the right channel. So now it's still a stereo track, but they're actually both the same. If I zoom out a bit here, cool, it updated the clip as well. So the clip now should have sound that comes out both speakers equally. It's another way of doing it. I want to show you one more way that I think is a little better. If I go to audio channels, let's just tell it it's a mono track. And then if we just tell it to use the left channel, it's a lot simpler, because then it's really just one track. But what that means is that we have to go in here and actually delete this clip and drag it back in, and then we have just one track. So I'm going to work with it that way. I think one track is better, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to rearrange anything on this clip, but I am going to trim and delete stuff that I don't want. So
Okay. To answer your question,
So he just kind of reiterates to answer your question, which I'm not going to use that in my interview.
I have always been interested in Mills.
So he says, and then he says, I've always been interested in Mills. So honestly, like, I'm just going to delete everything before this by dragging to there.
I've always been interested in Mills. It's just kind of a weird thing. I don't know why, but ever since I was a little boy. And my parents kind of helped me along by my interest in history and my interest in Mills. And I grew up in New York State, and in the Northeast. So that was there's quite a few more Mills there than I would say out west here.
Okay. Seems like sort of a rambling intro that's not really necessarily going anywhere that I think I'm going to use. But let's just say that like, I don't want to have you have to listen to this whole interview. So I'm going to make some quick decisions, and I want to show you a couple quick things you can do. So you could click the blade tool. This is the slowest way to do it. The razor tool, I guess. And you could click right here and make a cut. And then we can go back to the selection tool. And basically what that means is that these two clips are now split. I can now click on this side of the clip and this side, and I can do different things to the clip. I can move it. I can move it up or down. I could trim it. I could change the volume of it. All right. And this is really helpful because it actually helps us visualize breaks in the story where they happen. So now that we've got a cut there, we can keep playing, and we can say maybe there's a cut. Maybe there's another cut here. Let me just show you a faster way to make a cut. And you can actually make this cut live while you're playing the footage. It's Command K. So if you just hit Command K, or if you're on a computer, it should be Windows key. Is it Windows key K, or is it Control Option Alt? It might be Alt K on a Windows computer. Anyways, look at that. It just added an edit. Wherever I put my timeline playhead at, and I hit Command K, it adds an edit. So all of a sudden now I have these little pieces here. This is like so much faster than trying to like go over here and click and go over here and change my tool. So learn the shortcuts for some of these tools. This is the selection tool. The shortcut is V. So if I'm over here using like the razor tool and I'm manually adding cut points, then I don't want to have to go back and click on my selection tool. Just hit the V key on your keyboard. Boom, now I have this tool pulled up. And so, yeah, is it overwhelming? Probably at first, but every day if you can learn a new shortcut, you will be editing really quickly in no time. The other thing that's going to be kind of frustrating to you is you need to reposition, like, you need to zoom in and zoom out, right? Like, that's, there's the full length of the clip. We were just working on the very, very beginning of the clip over here. So, shortcut. Minus key and plus key on the top of your keyboard by the delete key on the right side. If you just hit minus, it zooms out. If you hit plus, it zooms in. And if you hit right below the delete key, there's this backslash key. This is the coolest shortcut. If you hit it, it zooms out to your full timeline. So I can see the full length of my clip, right? Remember how I said it was like an hour and 20 minutes? Here we are at an hour and 14 minutes. So you can see about here would be an hour and 20 minutes. But if I don't want to have to hit the plus button to zoom back in a million times, because that's sort of clunky. If you just hit the backspace key again, it takes you right back to where you were. So if you're ever like working on something, you're like, I need to do something over here, move this clip away, zoom back in, you can just sort of like instantly zoom out. And then the plus key can zoom you in, but you have to click on it a whole bunch of times. So if you want to just sort of toggle between way zoomed in and way zoomed out, it's a one button shortcut to do that, all right? It's pretty handy. What else do I need to show you? So let's just say that you've got you're listening through this and you made all these cuts. Let's say that I'm going to delete this here, all right? And let's imagine that this is the full interview, let's say you have done like a half-hour interview and you have the whole thing here. You've made these selections and you're like, you know what? I'm ready to go. I've got all the cuts made where I want them to be made. There's actually something else that I think you could do that's even more time-saving. Is while you're listening to it, if you're like, oh my goodness, this clip right here is so good, why don't you just like bump it to the next track down? And if you want, this is another shortcut. You could click and drag to make the track taller, but there's actually a faster way. If you hit Shift minus, it's going to collapse the track height. And if you hit Shift plus, it expands it. And sometimes you might want to make it bigger, so you can kind of drag it bigger if you want to. But I find that this is a really helpful way. I'm going to just move this up so I actually have more real estate here to see. This is a really helpful way that I organize my videos when I'm working on them. Is basically I have all this stuff up here at the top that is like, it's just the whole interview. But as I'm listening through it, I start to pull things down that I say, this is good. I think I might want to use this. And then when you're done with it all, you're going to have this timeline that looks something like this. And I suppose if you really wanted to, you could even do 3 layers where you're like, this is stuff that is like, I'm probably not going to use. The second track is stuff that I think I'm going to use. And this third track is stuff I'm for sure going to use, right? You can do it that way too if you want. I don't think it makes sense to do more than 3 tracks. But 2 tracks sometimes means you're going to have a lot of stuff on 2 tracks. And 3 tracks gives you sort of like a 1, 2, and 3 star version of this. So here we go. We've listened through the entire interview. We've made cuts where it makes sense to cut up sort of like the topics that the person's talking about. Maybe you've also trimmed a little bit of your own voice. Maybe you were asking questions and you sort of removed that from the interview so that they're all a little bit shorter here. There's little gaps between them because you were talking in between. And now you've just got your subject talking. And you've just got them organized by how much you like them. Here's where you go in and you duplicate this. And what I would do is this is, I believe, the string out that we're working with, right? So what I would do is I would now call this Rob's full interview, and I would just call it like O2, right? And let's open it up here, double click on it. And now let's go here and close the original one. And if we want, we can move Rob's full interview to Z old, or we can just leave it here because we kind of can have this visual. We're not going to probably have more than 2 or 3 of these anyways before we start editing. And now here's what I do. I go up here and I say, all this stuff that I said really wasn't that helpful. And I selected it all. There's a number of ways of selecting it. You can click and drag. You could use the track selection forward tool. I think if I hold down Shift, it only selects, you can see the 2 arrows change to 1 arrow, and it only selects the actual track that I have selected. So if I let go of Shift, it's going to select everything to the right of where I click. If I hold down Shift, it just selects that track. So there's multiple ways of doing it. You can click and drag. But anyways, we just want to hit the delete key on the keyboard. Boom. They're gone. Now, all we have left when we zoom out here and I minimize the track height is the good stuff, right? And so now if I want to work with this is way more helpful because now I don't have all this clutter of stuff that isn't useful. And this is really the first step in editing a doc, is figuring out how to get rid of stuff that isn't going to make it in the doc for sure. So you want to get that out of your head so you don't have to deal with that regularly. And honestly, if you can even do a little bit more than that, where you remove stuff that is maybe even good but not great, you want to be working with the great, right? And if you're working with the great stuff, you can always figure out later, like, you know what, I actually need something that I deleted, but let me go find it here. And you know that it's in a previous sequence, and you know that it's probably in the second track or the first track, that's where it's at, and you can find it relatively easily. But you're going to find that you're going to work faster if you're working with less material. If I gave you an interview that was only 10 minutes long, and I told you to make a story out of this, it would be much faster for you to kind of figure out what you're working with and do your best at making a story out of it than if I give you a half-hour interview. So your job is to listen through that half-hour interview and try to trim it down to the really good stuff so that you're not sitting there trying to make a 30-minute interview fit into a 2 or 3 minute video. Instead, maybe you're working with like 8 or 9 minutes of good work. And you want to make that fit into your video. Oh, that's so much easier to work with than it is to work with 30 minutes, right? So here we go. We've got our good stuff. We're ready to start editing. What do? Let's go to the current folder. Let's double click on that sequence. Let's open it up. And now we've got 2 sequences sort of side by side up here in the sequence bin. I'm just going to copy, highlight all these clips. You can hit Command C or Control C, or you can right click and hit copy. And then I'm going to go over here to this new sequence and I'm going to right click and hit paste. Come on, Control click. And my computer is being weird. For some reason, I can't right click, and it might be because there's actually nothing in this sequence, and until there's actually something in it, it doesn't let you right click. So we can go up here and go edit paste or hit Command V, and there it is. I'm still, for some reason, not able to get right click working. I think it's because I have one of these new MacBook Pros and I'm still learning how to use it. I'm not sure. All right. Zoom in here. So one of the other things that might be helpful is you might notice that there's a lot of gaps between your clips. And if there are, you can just click on the gap and you can hit the delete key. And it will basically like collapse that gap. Now, if you have stuff on multiple tracks and you do that, it might not work so well. But at least the stuff that's on the same track, it'll collapse it together. So this one I can just click and drag. Oh, by the way, snapping. Did you notice how that vertical line, that vertical black line appears? That is basically snapping the clip to the edge of that clip. Really, it's really helpful to make sure you don't accidentally leave a little bit of a gap between clips. But if you want to turn it off, the shortcut for that is S, and it's this little icon here. If I click on that, now when I click and drag this clip, it doesn't snap. It just kind of lets me put it wherever I want. I can have it with a little gap between them by accident, or over here. So snapping is really helpful, but also sometimes it gets in the way. So it's a toggle. So just hit S. Even while I'm dragging, if I hit S, it re-enables snapping, and you can see now that I can snap it to my clip. So anyways, I'm going to sort of zoom it out. I think, just be aware, you can click and drag and move things around wherever you need. You can hit Command C and Command V, and you can kind of paste multiple copies of things. You can move them between sequences. It's really easy. So really what I would do at this point is just remind you that, I don't know if it's reminding, it's maybe the first time I'm telling you this, but you don't actually have to start at the beginning. So what you're going to have is a sequence that's full of different clips from the interview, right? Maybe I should just kind of open up Rob's original interview here, and let me just set, I'm going to set an in point and out point. I'm going to drag some more material in here, and I'm just going to make some cuts on it just to imagine you had a longer piece to work with, right? And so you've got some stuff that's really good and some stuff that you're like not sure, but it's still also good. So maybe this is more like what you have for your final edit or for your final listen. What are you going to do with it? Well, here's what I say. Try to find thoughts that you think are good conclusion thoughts. So maybe if you listen to this line here,
Learn how to do it.
maybe he says something there and he ends some sort of really beautiful concluding thought, and you're like, you know what, that could be my ending. Move that over, like over here. You can zoom out really far if you want. Just don't accidentally collapse. If you zoom out really far, sometimes you can trim the clip and you're like, where'd my clip go? And you have to hit Command Z or undo to bring it back. All right. But anyways, the idea here is like to move things around and think, I think this could be my ending too. And then over here, this is a good intro. I'm going to leave this as my intro. And this is stuff that I'm not really sure. It's sort of the body of my piece. Maybe it's like Act 2. It's my middle. These are all good pieces here, all right? And so you sort of organize them in this way. If you can have like a beginning, middle, and end, and you can have like 5 different ends and 5 different beginnings and 10 different middles, right? Whatever it is, but it's what you've done now is you've actually organized your story into some sort of a coherent thought process, where now what you're going to do is duplicate this demo, and maybe you'll just call it, Tim's demo, and maybe you would call this Tim's demo 2 underscore, and let's put the other one in the Z old folder. And now with Tim's demo 2, make sure you close the other ones. What we can do is we can actually listen to it, and we can say, you know what? This one here that I thought was better, it is better. I'm going to delete these 2. This is going to be my keeper. This is my intro. I love that. And it really segues nicely into this thought over here. So I'm going to delete these 2. I'm going to keep this one. I'm going to move it over here. But you know what? This one is a little, oops, let me undo that. This one here is a little too long. We're actually going to trim it right here where there's this gap. So we're going to move it right over there. And that's where it should end. And obviously you're going to be listening to it to make these decisions, right? Zoom out, and you're like, and this piece now connects here. And then for my ending, I'm going to use this one. I don't want this one. I'm going to hit delete to remove it. I'm going to move this one in. And oh my goodness, there's my film. I play it back, I listen to it, and it works. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's like 2 to 3 minutes, and you love it. Okay, you're ready. You've got your first cut done. You're ready to send it off for review. So you're going to go here to File, Export. Oh, by the way, make sure you've selected your sequence. It's got the blue rectangle around it. File, Export, Media, And you're going to select your format as AIFF, and you're going to give it a name by clicking on the name there, that blue line, and you're going to put it in the exports folder. And let's just give it the name of the actual sequence we were working on. And we're going to hit save. And so there it is. It's going to be 1 minute and 32 seconds long. We're exporting only audio. This is the name of the file that's going to export. These are the settings, and honestly, the default settings are great. We're going to leave it as stereo. And we just hit the export button. And it's there. Go to Finder. Let's go into our exports folder for our project here, right? And there it is. There's my finished
Or working mills.
1 minute and 32 long
Hap-
rough cut of my film. And then you're going to take this and you're going to upload it to your Whipster folder. All right. So I think that covers sort of the very, very basics of how to start editing and organizing your work. There's definitely a lot of things that can be frustrating to you that you may have trouble with. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is use the team's, what's it called? Your production group in Teams to ask questions of your TA while you're working. And if I'm available, I'll jump in and answer them for you, or jump on a call and you can share your screen with me. If I'm not, the TA will do it as well. So between myself and the TA, we'll be here to answer your questions. The best way to learn is just to dive in and start doing it. Like I said, if you stay organized and you save often, I don't think you'll ever get to the point where you can't go back and find something that you need, because you're going to make a lot of simple errors when you're learning for the first time. One of the easy things that can happen to you, right? Here's a problem that happens to you. You're clicking and dragging these clips around, and you accidentally clip and overwrite. Maybe you accidentally put it on top of this clip and you let go of it. And oh my goodness, you just overwrote the whole end of this clip here. If I hit Command Z to undo it, you'll see that the clip used to be much longer, but you accidentally overwrote it. And so now when you listen to him talking, it cuts him off.
But to answer your question is center the log.
Yeah, right? Like it just completely overwrote what he was saying. Undo. So, when that happens, if you catch it, great, you can just undo it. If you don't catch it, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to move the clip away and drag this out and figure out where it was supposed to end at. Or maybe if you've been, duplicating your sequences, not every once in a while, you can just go back to a previous sequence, open it up, and find that clip and be like, there it is. And then you can just copy it, go back in here and say, all right, delete that, paste this one back in here, and there it is. That's where it's supposed to go. Oh, by the way, before I let you go, a couple more shortcuts that are really helpful. The left and right arrow keys, they advance you one frame at a time. If you look here, you have the number 17. If I hit the right arrow, it's 18, 19, 20. You can advance things one frame at a time by left and right arrows. But if you hit the up and down keys, it will take you to the beginning and end of your clips. And this is really helpful to just kind of jump around quickly in your timeline, right? But it's only going to take you to tracks that are targeted. So if you click the blue A1, A2, A3, if I have clips on different tracks, for example, if I move this down to A2 and I untarget A2 and A3, when I hit the up and down arrow keys, you can see that it actually skips the output or the last part of this clip here. It should go here, but it doesn't. And that's because the up and down arrow keys are only going to work with whatever tracks are targeted. So as soon as I add this track and target it, now when I hit the down arrow, it stops where it's supposed to stop. Good, right? So sometimes this will happen to you too, where you're like, why can't I get to where I want to go with these shortcuts? Targeting, all right? One more thing, I keep saying one more thing. Oftentimes when you're listening to the interview, it's nice to listen to it a little faster because you know where they're going and you don't need to listen to it at real speed. So hit spacebar.
Everywhere. They did that here in the Napa
The J, K, and L keys on your keyboard are the trick. If you hit L,
Valley. I mean, you look at the construction of the mill. It's timber frame. It's big beams.
it plays it faster. And if you hit L again, it plays it even faster. And if you hit L again, it plays it even faster. And the same thing back with J. J will play it backwards.
Sneak.
right? So, and spacebar will stop you. Or K. K is also
So,
going to stop you. So spacebar is start and stop. And so I just basically use like J and L and spacebar.
It's like Q lock square. I mean, that log.
And so if you don't really want to like click and drag around, you can just use your keys. And so this is cool while you're playing.
I mean, people did that everywhere.
Let's say I want to make a cut right here, right? I'm listening to it when he says everywhere. So I'm going to play it at fast speed.
Log into a beam, the square. I mean, people did that everywhere. They did that here in the Napa Valley.
And you're like, oh, wow, I actually want to make a cut there. Well, just go back.
And there you had,
Oh, there's that gap right there. Now I'm going to hit Command K to add my cut. Keep moving on.
they did that here in the Napa Valley. I mean, you look at the construction of the mill. It's
Boom. Super easy. So, I don't know. I'm hoping that these shortcuts are a little bit helpful for you. I know this has been a little rambly and it's late at night here while I'm recording this, but I think that it's going to be better for you to have the ability to play and rewind this as you need or fast forward it as you need versus me doing a live demo in class. So I'd rather use my time during lab for you to ask me questions when you get stuck with something after you've watched this video. So yeah, good luck with your editing, and I look forward to seeing your first drafts.